Welcome to the Fabulous at 50 podcast, where we are changing the aging narrative. I'm your host, Joanne, and I'm thrilled to bring you stories that matter and celebrate your place in the world. As an advocate for lifelong learning, health, and women's empowerment, I believe it's never too late to live the life you've always imagined. Through lively and informative interviews with inspiring guests, we'll explore a wide range of topics relevant to our global sisterhood of vibrant, inquiring women just like you. Join me for today's episode, and let's start changing the aging narrative together. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. I have an amazing guest for you today. She is a ball of energy and so engaging from the moment I met her earlier this year. Her and her husband have been running a real estate business, and now they are going to be taking their skills and wisdom on how you are a married team, but also a business team, and how you take that partnership into being a powerhouse. So today I welcome Zena Krogedal. Welcome, Zena.
Thank you so much, Joanne, for having me. Joanne, you have an amazing show and amazing reach of helping women. So I just thank you so much that you are giving me the honor to be on this show. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, let's start off with that. When you first said, "Oh, can I be on your show?" Or can I join your group next year? It was something along those lines. I had to take a double take because I honestly thought you were like a decade or more younger than it turns out that you are, not to give your age away. And I was just thrilled that we were able to come together and I can showcase you on our episode this week. So why don't we share with everybody first and foremost kind of how we met, which was back in February when we both were at a business retreat, and people came from all over the States and Canada. And we just had really, talking about Powerhouse, we had a real powerhouse group of people gathering for that retreat.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal time. I mean, from the moment we walked into the mansion, which was already like breathtaking, and then meeting the people that attended. And it was so intimate too, because it wasn't like a ton of people. But in those 3-4 days, we really got to know each other, and the bonds and relationships that formed were just amazing. So I am so grateful and thankful to know you, Joanne. And I would encourage others, like if you are ever hesitating to do something that's out of your norm, I want to encourage you to do it, because you never know who is on the other side, what relationships you may form, and what opportunities there may be. So it was definitely a great time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that one of the things I'm very grateful for is being able to meet you. And I'm excited to kind of delve in and learn a bit more about what you're doing. I'm super excited when you told me your newest project. So, what I understand is that you and your husband, for quite some time now, have been partners in a real estate business. That's correct?
Yeah. That is correct. Yeah.
And you've been doing really well with that. But I understand that what you're going to do now is take the wisdom that the two of you have developed on how to work together as partners, like being husband and wife and business partners, and you're going to start sharing that for other people that might be out there in the world, and they're navigating this. How do we stay married? How do we work? So I have so many questions. Well, you just jump in and let us know, how did that come about?
So we've been married for over 19 years, going on 20. It'll be 20 March of 2024. And so, of course, the dynamics of marriage itself can be very complicated. As anybody who's been married knows, that you've got two people trying to come together and becoming one and unified, and communicating is a challenge in and of itself. But then when you throw in owning a business together or running a business together and seeing each other a lot,
That's a lot of time together.
It's a lot of time together. And just to kind of give you an idea, for us, we obviously have been through a lot in the 20 years because anybody who's been married any length of time, there's a lot of ups and downs. And anybody who
Yeah.
tells you anything different, I think is just in denial because it's just, there's a lot of learning how to communicate, learning each other's languages. I mean, let's face it, men and women are very different in how we communicate and how we interpret what's going on. And so, taking the time, and it takes a while to figure that out. But in the beginning, when we first got married, my husband was in law enforcement, and
Okay.
and I worked as a dental hygienist, and this was my second marriage, and so I had two little kids coming into this marriage, and so we had some challenges already that were coming in. His schedule, for one, was crazy. And being married to someone who is in law enforcement, it's challenging as well because you don't know if they're coming home. You don't know if they're going to come home the same. You
It's
don't know.
so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of dynamic. And then their schedule. So when he'd work the
Mm.
night shift, sometimes he'd be on the night shift. In fact, for several years, he was on the night shift. I'd work the daytime. So we would go days sometimes without seeing each other much, just a quick text, hey, good night, whatever. But in even being married, I felt like I was still a single mom for a while because I'm like, I don't really see him.
Mm.
And so we had to work through those things. And then he, just circumstances and everything, he ended up going into real estate, getting out of law enforcement. And so now you're talking about now I'm seeing my husband more. So that was a transition, and
Quite a
as
bit.
quite a bit. And then his business starts to pick up and he says, look, I think I need your help. You're going to need to get licensed. And so I did. So I started working part-time with him as a real estate agent.
Okay.
And so for the past 5.5, almost 6 years now, we've been doing real estate together. And so that's another dynamic because now we not only see each other a little bit more than when was in law enforcement, but we see each other a lot more.
I
And
was going to say that's a big shift. You went from the beginning of your marriage where it's like, hi, honey, bye, honey, I'll see you later, to 24/7 pretty much.
yeah, yeah. And now we're in a phase of our lives where our children are young adults. And so we don't
Hmm.
have little kids anymore. And so this is the first time that we actually have had time to really just be with each other, travel together. And that was one of the reasons why this year was a year we decided we were going to really sign up and learn and do things, go to business conferences. And so we've been able to do that a lot because we don't have the responsibilities of having little kids in the house anymore. So it's a fun time, but it's certainly a
Hmm.
lot of adjustments, right? But as
Was
we've
learning time for sure.
a
And
lot of learning time.
yeah, and the time to reflect on what you've done. You've had these different careers and you're going in it now, almost you're about to launch something that's really kind of a third wave where you get to take all of your wisdom and experience and share that with others. So tell me how this has come about. That I understand you want to do a like a couples counseling or marriage counseling, but with a niche market specifically for couples that are in business together, which is challenging.
Yes, absolutely. And we throughout the years we've also served at our church. And so one of the
Hmm.
ministries that we had is that we did marriage counseling. So for several years we've been counseling
Okay.
marriages as well. And so yes, so what we came to realize is that okay, we do love real estate. We do love helping people come realize the American dream. But as we're interacting with a lot of other business owners and seeing what other real estate agents, there's a lot of husband and wife teams out there, is that some of them they tolerate each other, but they don't necessarily really like each other. And then
Oh,
they
okay.
don't isn't necessarily, and you know what I mean. So you can tell that
Yeah.
sometimes this
They
isn't
love
there.
each other, but they don't always like each other. I get it.
Yeah, yeah. Or they become more, it's just business partners and they don't know how to rekindle
Mm,
because you're not clocking in and clocking out anymore. So you
good
no longer
point.
leave work behind. Work work is with you pretty much all the time. Your conversations can be work all the time if you aren't careful. So you have to learn to have boundaries and you have to learn to say, okay, this time is we're not going to talk about work anymore. We're going to talk about us. We're going to talk about our dreams. We're going to talk about
Yeah.
let's rekindle the fire. Let's go on date nights. Let's go on vacations where it's just us. And so it can be challenging to really learn to balance that. if
Hmm.
that's the word you want to use, but really truly
Hmm.
try to incorporate where does that line stop.
Yeah. Really good points. Like there has to be a strategy, because if it's all business or all marriage, like yeah, there's some real interesting dynamics that go on there. I know a friend that she specifically belongs to an organization that is all family run businesses. So when it's a whole family, right, and all the dynamics, so I can imagine, though, husband and wife teams, it's really interesting, and you can really very much support people with that. At one point you said something about American Dream Makers, and I just want to point out that you have been running a podcast called the American Dream Makers, and which I got to be on recently, which was amazing, lots of fun, and you have such interesting guests. So was American Dream Makers kind of the name of your real estate company, or was it just something that grew from your real estate business that you wanted to just start having interesting people on your show?
That's a great question. So American Dream Makers actually started, Ken Walls, which is, part
Yeah.
when we were at the retreat with Turn It Up. I'm on his Grow Live Academy. So learning how to grow your business through live streaming, which is where I started the podcast. And so just on one, this is the beauty of a mastermind and belonging to
Yeah.
groups like this, is that,
Yeah.
he was like, have you been doing it? Why aren't you doing it? I'm like, I don't even know what to call it. And then so I threw out some names, and so the people on there are like, you should do American Dream Makers. That's great. And I said I can have any guests I want. They're like, absolutely. And honestly, it was very fitting because I'd been thinking about what name would I call the podcast if I did it. And so it
Hmm.
really metamorphosed into, yeah, we are American dream makers. We're living the American dream. We've achieved the American dream. My parents immigrated from Vietnam and absolutely obtained the American dream. And I do believe all of us, the American dream belongs to all of us. And not only can you achieve it, but you absolutely can go beyond. And it doesn't just necessarily mean just home ownership or owning real estate, but it also means, obtaining great relationships. It also means establishing the things in life that give you peace and security
Yeah.
and safety. And even
Yeah.
if you're not an American, that dream, people talk about the American dream, and everyone knows what that
What that
symbolizes.
term means. Yeah. Yeah. Can you share a little bit about you immigrating as a child or with your family? Because that's quite a fascinating story as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I was just a year old when my family came to the United States, and we were one of the fortunate ones because my dad worked for a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Government. And how he got there was that when he was a young man at 17, his brother died in the war because it was a
Mhm.
long war, as you know. And so he was very angry. He dropped out of high school, joined the army. He wanted to kill some communists, and fast forward a few years, he ended up
Mhm.
stepping on a landmine. And fortunate for him, it broke his ankle, shattered it, but that was it. He obviously was alive and was able to move.
Fortunate he lived. Not
Yeah,
fortunate his ankle got broken, but
not
fortunate
fortunate his
he
ankle.
lived.
Well, although I would have to say it probably is fortunate that his ankle
Mm,
got injured
okay.
because he got discharged from the
Okay.
army. And so
Mm,
that gave this next season of life the opportunities that came because now he no longer could serve and because it's a long drawn out war, I mean, the longer you're there, the likelihood of you surviving becomes less and less, right? So
true.
in a sense, I think that probably is fortunate that he had an injury that took him out, gave him new opportunities. He ended up landing a job with the US government. And so when my mom and him had me, he told me I had the best of the best because American dollars went a long ways. And
Mm,
after I think I was just a little over a year old. Yes,
mhm.
because it was April that we left. That he came to work one day and his boss said, "Hey, so tonight you're leaving. You need to go home and get your wife and your daughter and come back to the embassy. Your plane leaves at this time. We're
And
getting
where
out."
was this?
This was in Saigon. So we were in
Here's
Saigon.
Saigon. Okay.
And this is during the fall of Saigon. So the fall of Saigon actually
Oh,
occurred
okay.
on April 30th. We left, I believe it was April 24th. So we were one of the first to get
Wow.
evacuated. My dad said about 2 days prior, there was a lady that he worked with. She left with a plane full of orphans, and that plane got shot down just a few seconds after it
Oh,
got taken off. Yes. So
oh.
horrific. I'm sure if people remember that time, if they were in that time, I'm sure they remember that being reported on the news. But it was horrific. And of course, my dad said, well, when it was
Wow.
our turn to go, I wasn't sure if we were going to even make it out. Like, are we going to even,
Mm,
take off? And they didn't know where they were going.
imagine.
Yeah. And I can't imagine either because my mom, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of notice. My dad came home and said, okay, we got to get going, get in the car. So she
Hmm.
forgot my formula, I guess. And so he said, thankfully, my dad said, thankfully, there was another woman on the plane that had some extra. So I was able to eat. He said, I was crying baby on the plane,
Aw.
C-130, packed in like sardines. I can't imagine the stress that had to have been for everybody that was on that plane.
Yeah. But as
But
you
we ended,
said, you were one of the fortunate ones that
yeah,
was able to escape a really not good situation.
right. And so then we ended up in Camp Pendleton in California for 6 months until we had a sponsor and we ended up moving to Arizona. So I grew up in Flagstaff and my dad worked any job that he could get. But after a
Mhm.
while, the jobs that he wanted to have required a high school diploma.
Mm,
So he went and got his GED. And while he was getting his
great.
GED, he decided, well, I don't want to clean floors and toilets the rest of my life. So I'm going to go to college. So he went to college and got his degree in computer science and engineering. And a few years later, he ended up being able to buy his first home. And so the
Amazing.
American dream was absolutely achieved through just hard work and determination. And my dad is a true inspiration because honestly, Joanne, when I went to college, so I grew up in the United States, right? And of course, English is my second language. I didn't even learn English until I hit school. But, kids, as you know,
Oh,
the
wow.
neuroplasticity of the brain of kids is phenomenal in picking up a lot of things. And so I learned English, and English now is my primary language. But going to
Wow.
college, I don't know how my dad was able to write those papers and listen, and because he had only been in this country just for a few years.
He was a
Uh,
very determined man, and
yes,
it's just amazing how far education can take you, right? No matter what I do know, and I've heard this from others, is just people can take your house away. They can take your land away. But they can't take away your education. They can't take away your drive and determination. And people that have that and really internalize it will do well no matter where they go.
yeah, absolutely. So he's definitely been an inspiration and certainly a real hero for me to have just really remembered that my dad was able to overcome so many things, and my
Wow.
mother too. I mean, just so yeah. So fast forward, here I am living my life. Definitely, the American dream was always something that I definitely
Yeah.
clung on to and wanted to achieve. And so my husband and I just love helping other people gain that. And now we just want to add, something else to it to how can we impact our world a little bit more. And so we see this
Hmm.
as a need and we see this as an area that could really help because let's face it, if a husband and wife aren't doing well, marriage wise, their businesses also suffers. The
Yeah.
community suffers if they're really involved in the community. So if we can give them skills and tools to really get to where their marriage is thriving and feeling abundant and just all the positive energies that are happening, right? Then
Yeah.
your business is naturally going to also skyrocket
Do
and
well. Yeah.
do well.
I love this concept. So what I'm hearing really what's interesting is it's very much a back and forth because marriages themselves break down from stress. And one of the biggest stresses is from your business or your work not doing well. So if you can help them to do better as business partners and be real powerhouses, then that's going to help their marriage. But then the other way around, that a business as partners can only do well if as a couple they're doing well. So really it's kind of like you're helping with both. And I love this uniqueness because people, if they're struggling as a couple, might go off to marriage counselors, but if they don't have a concept of what it's like to be partners in business and just in marriage, like you are uniquely positioned to support people in this kind of niche market here. Like, what a beautiful thing to come
Yeah.
to and be able to say, everything I do now, I can put together and really set it going in a meaningful way. I love that.
Yes, and I know when we were talking when you were on the American Dreammakers podcast, we were talking about hitting 50 and how that's a place where you start to kind of like what's that next season of life looking like, and so you start to really be reflective. And so my husband and I, as we start to leave our 40s decade here, that is
Yeah.
absolutely where we're at. The children are now grown. We've we have or we are so proud of them. They are doing very well. But it's like, okay, so now what do we have to offer others? And so
Mhm.
how amazing when we start to really look at what can we bring to the table to add value to our community, to our world, to the business world. And this was it. And so you're right in that we feel very blessed and we're very excited for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Tell me, I'm curious, it with see in the last couple years or even sort of how you're feeling right now, have you noticed a shift in you as you're getting older or coming, you said you're launching into a new chapter. What has really shifted in you internally?
Yeah, there has been a shift. And some of that too, there was a catalyst. My mother passed away last year.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry.
so
Yeah.
and as you know, that we're at the age where parents are, like you had mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
many times, is that our parents are aging or they're passing. And so these are different milestones in our lives, right? And so when my mom passed, I think it was a real catalyst for me to really reflect and see that life truly is so short. And
Mm-hmm.
my mom went through a lot of traumatic things in her life, even before
Mm-hmm.
leaving Vietnam. She had a very traumatic childhood and a lot of things going on. And I can't imagine having a little baby and leaving the country and going to another culture and learning a new language and all those things and having to raise your child in something completely new, what that must have felt like, and not being able to really talk about it. One, the generation doesn't really talk about those things, but two, there was no therapy and there was no therapist that could really help her get through the traumas. But
Yeah.
she spent her life really a victim in many ways. She didn't know how to get out of
Mm-hmm.
it. She didn't know how to get out of those thoughts, and she didn't know how to. And so, when she passed, for me, the light bulb was like, "Gosh, her life went by so fast, and she spent a lot of it not really enjoying it. Like she had
Yeah.
moments of joy, but she didn't. But most of it was, I feel like life is happening to me, not necessarily for me." And I knew
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to live that way as a young woman. I knew I didn't want to be that way. But when she passed, I really knew life is really short. So there's more for us to do. There's more for me to do. And I better get on it and quit wasting time and not let fear hold me back,
Amazing.
because fear held my mom back so much. And I just didn't want that to be the case for me. So that's where, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, like, what I'm hearing is that you really took stock of your life. Am I doing what I want to be doing? Am I headed in the direction I want to be headed? And you and your husband, Chris, really take that to heart. And I think do some beautiful work in the world. I am curious now if we could delve a little bit into um, what are your three pearls of wisdom or your three philosophies of life? I think, maybe one of them right now you just said, but what else do you have in there that you can share with our listening audience?
Well, I would say that the three pearls of wisdom, which, to narrow it down to three
Is
is
hard.
tough itself, right? But
You can do
but
more.
for me, it's definitely knowing, who you are, where your identity lies. For me, my identity lies in Jesus, and I know who I am,
Mm,
and that sort of thing. And then the other, is also really putting marriage as a priority and knowing
Mm,
that it takes two to make it work. And there's a lot of communicating and compromising and forgiveness and a lot of things that go along with that because we're humans. So there's none that are perfect.
mhm,
We may look perfect on the outside, but nobody is. We have something, and our spouses are the ones that see the ugliness in us more than anybody else. And so to learn to forgive and realize that the person doesn't have ill intent towards you is huge. And then for sure get the skills that you need to make that marriage, something great. And then third is, just go out there and truly live the life that you've been assigned to live. I believe that all of
mm,
us are given an assignment in our lives, and maybe their assignments can change for the seasons, but when we can truly live in that assignment, that's where true joy and true happiness really will occur. So, and everything else will fall into place. So if you've got those things in line, I really have come
yeah,
to realize that everything else will fall into place, because no matter what, like you said before, that people can take away all these things, but these are the things that
mhm,
people cannot take away. No one can take your identity away once you know what it
yeah,
is. No one
yeah,
can take, if you've got a solid marriage, you feel like you're a superpower. You truly can be a powerhouse and impact the world in so many ways when you've got a partner that you know for sure is always on your team. And then, absolutely,
oh yeah,
enjoying and being in the assignment of your purpose of what you're
yeah,
supposed to do. You're
yeah.
unstoppable.
I love those. Living on purpose, really valuing the relationship, your partnership, and finding someone that you can have a give relationship with. I always say that when it's not working, it feels like it's a pull.
Mhm.
And when we choose to give into, a relationship, and we learn, um, I always like to say, learn to generously give and graciously receive. Because, people talk about, oh, it's a give take. And I'm like, I don't like that term. Nobody likes to be taken from, nobody likes to take. But if it's a give receive, then
Yeah.
it's like a natural flow, and sometimes one person's carrying the load more and sometimes it's the other. But, over the years, it balances out. So having that relationship and nurturing it and knowing that you can be partners and a powerhouse together, and having a purpose, having a drive, having knowing that what you're doing in the life is making a difference to somebody else's life, and that all stems from having your identity and where your strength comes from. It's pretty magical, my dear. It's pretty magical. And that's why I wanted to have you on this show. And I was really drawn to you when we first met, really just back in February, not that long ago. You were just, there was like, you have this beautiful radiance about you, that you really are, you're living the talk, like you're walking the talk. Isn't that, what's the term? I'm using the wrong term here. But what you talk about is also what I can tell you truly feel in your heart, which is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's been a fun adventure and a real journey for sure. And thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, I'm
And
I'm
just,
thrilled to have you on. Before we let you go, can you let people know the best way for them to reach you?
yes, please, you can go to zenakrogedal.com, or you can go to American Dream Makers and become part of the group there. And I'm also
Okay.
on YouTube as American Dream Makers. But yeah, you can absolutely get a hold of me, Zena Krogedal. Google my name. My information is absolutely out there. And Krogedal, I know Krogedal is a little tricky, but it is Krogedal. And yeah, absolutely get a hold of me. I'd love to chat with you. And I love meeting people. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, maybe we'll have you on again. And actually, I think what would be fantastic is, um, let's plan, sometime this year to get you on as one of the guest speakers within our Fab Soul Circle membership, right?
Oh,
And yeah, I think it'd be great where Yes, it's wonderful to listen to our podcast, but when we get you into our membership, into our Fab Soul Circle gatherings, then there can be a little bit more of a juicy conversation amongst some of the other women that are in the group, and can ask you a few more direct questions. It'd be wonderful to have you part of that.
Great. I'd be very honored. Thank you again, Joanne. Really appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Well, everyone, you've been listening to the Fabulous of 50 podcast, where we're changing the aging narrative and having meaningful conversations. And I'm so grateful that you were here, Zena Krogedal. It's so lovely to see you. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. But before you leave, I'm curious. What pearl of wisdom are you taking away from today's episode? I do hope it held some inspiration or information for you to live your best life. If you are not yet part of our sisterhood, I invite you to join our community by visiting our website, fabulousat50.com, and you'll receive a free copy of our ebook, Make Mine Fabulous, 21 Ways to Energize Your Life. It is packed with loads of tips and tricks. Plus, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to this podcast and leave us a review to let us know what you think. Remember, keep choosing fabulous. It's never too late to live the life you deserve. Catch you on the next episode.